and welcome back to The Writer's Dream. My name is Dina Santarelli, and today our special guest author is Ethan Dreilinger. He is the co-author of the ebook Out of the Dust, and today he's here to tell us all about it. Ethan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dina.
So tell me a little bit about your book, Out of the Dust. What is it about?
The story's about a guy who's a TV reporter who sort of gets himself wrapped up in a massive kind of terrorism plot with a series of explosions and stuff, and all of it really is to mask a simple robbery with lots of death and destruction mixed into it.
Ah, so it's a love story.
Yes.
So where did you get the idea for this book? Was this something that you sort of just came up with, or was this an idea that's been floating around in your mind for a long time?
So here's the backstory to that.
Okay.
I was writing for my blog at kind of right at the beginning of the summer, like late spring, I guess, and really was challenged, writer blocked for my blog. Mm-hmm. So I started doing like little creative writing, little short stories and stuff like that, just to sort of help me channel some stuff out. So this way I can get back to my blog and focus on that a little bit better. And a friend of mine was sort of suffering the same problem. So I had always kicked around this concept of co-authoring a book, but you never actually talk about the book. So you just alternate writing chapters. I write a chapter, you write a chapter, she writes a chapter, I write a chapter.
Do you read her chapter before?
Yes.
Okay.
You read her chapter, then I write my chapter, then she reads mine, and that's how that book came to be, was literally, so it wasn't this great plan to have this, it was literally like, I wrote a beginning, she wrote the next part, and then we just continued on until we meandered our way to a conclusion.
You know what's interesting about that? I'm also an author, and I've written a novel, and I suffered writer's block while writing that novel. And to combat my writer's block, I started a blog. So I sort of did the inverse of what you did to get me through the writing.
And it sort of works, because I think that even at work, I had gone through this 2-week spurt where I was doing like all kinds of technical writing and writing about budgets and taking budgets and turning them into documents and stuff like that. And like I was so frazzled, I could not get back to my blog because I was so focused on that. So I needed to find something else to write about to sort of spur, okay, you can actually think that aren't in context of numbers and budgets and technical stuff. So it really helps, right? So if you're blocked, in one area, channel something else, I think.
Well, maybe we should say what you do for a living. What is your day job?
My day job is I work for Verizon with a part of the company called Verizon Digital Media Services, which is kind of a software layer-ish kind of part of Verizon.
So you do a lot of writing as part of your...
I do a lot of, it's a lot of technical writing. It's not overly creative writing. It's really working with our clients to better use what we're offering to them.
Okay. Now, how did you decide? I mean, I would think that co-authoring a novel with someone is sort of like starting a business with someone, and you really have to pick the right person to do that with. I mean, was there any thought into, will this person stick around long enough to finish the novel? I mean, how well did you know your co-author?
I know her pretty well. She's been a friend of mine for a while. But we didn't set out to write a book that anyone would ever read. It really was just sort of an experiment to see what would happen if you could actually come up with something that was readable. And sort of about the midway point through it where we were thinking, this isn't really bad. We sent it around to some people. They're like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think about this? And they're like, oh, this is great. I can't wait to find out what happens.
That's great.
So we went back and reread it again, and we're like, yeah, I guess we actually do have a story here. We actually have a beginning and a middle. So let's just try to figure out, what the end is, and I think we can actually have a story.
Now, was she also sort of suffering a writer's block, or what was her motivation, would you say, for doing this project with you? Was it just looking to do something fun, or had she always wanted to write a book?
She was looking to do something fun. She does a lot of sci-fi type writing, which is an area that I don't really venture into all that well. And she was kind of suffering that same kind of writer's block where she had like 3 or 4 different projects going, and none of them were making much progress. So she thought trying something different would help her out.
And why this particular genre? Was it something whose idea was it for that first chapter, or this genre? Was that yours?
The first chapter was mine in this book.
And is it, I know that you're a newsman. You do have a background as a newsman, and I know that's the basis for the book. I mean, obviously, you must draw from your own life and your profession.
I think you have to in anything that you write. Even back at work when I do technical writing, right? You draw on your experiences, and you have to do that. It's the only way. It's the only way to really, in my opinion, put some soul into what you're writing and sort of make it resonate with anyone who's reading it, whether it's someone at the C-level in a company reading this technical overview of a video platform and a bunch of budget numbers, or someone downloading a book on Kindle. It has to resonate.
No, I agree with you. Now, did you, how did this work, this back and forth of the chapters? I mean, did you set a time limit, or did you say, you know what, you can take as much time as you like, and then I'll go, or that kind of thing? How did you do it?
It was the latter. It was literally, okay, I did my chapter, I'd text her or send her an email, okay, you're up. And then she would do her chapter and text me your email, okay, your turn.
And how many chapters were there in the book?
I want to say it's 23, 24 chapters.
Okay. So basically it was pretty informal, the process, but you managed to knock out this book in a matter of months, yes?
Weeks.
Weeks?
I want to say it was maybe 3 weeks, and then another couple of days to format it.
That's incredible. I mean, I find my problem as a writer, I think, is finding the motivation a lot of times to sit down and really do it. I mean, what do you find is your motivation to sit down and write? Was it just a matter of unblocking yourself from the blog, or was there something else driving you? Or did you always want to write a novel?
I've always wanted to write a novel. I've actually written a bunch of novels that have not yet seen the light of day. They're sort of sitting
in a drawer somewhere.
No, I wish they were sitting in a drawer. They're actually sitting on a floppy disk, and I haven't a clue at this point in time in my life how to get something from a floppy disk to something else at this point in time. But I've always wanted to try it out and see what would happen. And then when you sort of look at, and those were written with publishing in mind, right? So the goal was, I would have a book in my hand that I can hand to people, and people could sit at a table and I could sign it for them.
Yeah, of course. That's the dream, right?
I'm not so sure that that's the dream any longer.
Really? Well, yeah, there's not many books, as many book signings as there once were. That's true. And
the reality is, unless I'm signing someone's Kindle, they really don't want, it's the market, the book market to me is an electronic market now. And it's great. I mean, I would love to actually have a leather-bound version of my book to stick on a shelf someplace.
Right, right.
But the reality is that I still read it on my iPad, so.
Right. So there was never any intention of having like a hardcover or a paperback or a physical book in hand? No,
there really wasn't. And, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. The most straightforward answer, though, is that the effort to get to market is so much easier in electronic. I mean,
very much so.
It literally, and one day was spent trying to understand the formatting, but then it was another day to format it and then just submitting it off, and it was basically on Kindle within 2 days of that.
Right, right. But as far as when you were actually writing the book, I mean, did it come easily to you? I mean, obviously, you wrote it very quickly with your co-author. I mean, that's incredible. So you basically just sat down, and would you say it was easier to write this novel than it is to work on, say, a blog post?
I'm not sure that it's easier, because at least for me with my blog post at Dad the Single Guy, that's sort of like the nonfiction stuff. It's my life and the way my life unfolds and stuff along those lines.
Right.
Those are a little bit tougher, but the constraints are a lot simpler. Mm-hmm. Right?
In what way? In what way?
It's freewheeling. I mean, I can write it in first person, third person, no person. Right. I don't have to worry about characters and story development. Writing a fiction story, you have to. I mean, the toughest thing that I have with any creative writing that I do is I introduce characters and I can't remember their names. So I'm constantly going back looking for a character's name. How did I spell that again?
I know, I've done that too.
So then I started creating cheat sheets. So here's the character, here's some information about the character. Here's what I've said about the character, and then I forget to update the cheat sheets, and then that's where you have to go back and do your editing and make sure you've got your character making sense. And the worst is when you change characters' names, and then then it's just a big mess.
Yes.
And
how old are they now? At first I made her 17, now she's 18, and it just throws everything out of whack.
But in my blog, I don't have that problem.
That's true.
My blog,
Pretty fine.
it's just, it's what it is, what I see, and it could be 100 words, 1,000 words, 10,000 words. It doesn't matter. So they're really very different writing disciplines, I think.
But in some ways, they're similar. Yes, I mean.
In some ways, they're similar, right?
Yeah.
You still have to have that self-discipline to sit down and, okay, I'm going to blog today and get it done.
Right.
Or, okay, I'm going to do my chapter today and I'm going to get it done. Or, okay, I'm going to blog and do a chapter today and get them both done.
Now, you would consider this book a thriller, yes?
Yes.
Is that what you would consider the genre?
Yes.
Or is that a genre that you like to read? Because they say you really should write books in the genre that you like to read. Would you say that that's the case for you?
Easily 90%, if not more, of what I read are in that thriller.
In that thriller.
Yeah.
Who are some of your favorite authors, would you say?
I go through a lot of moods with that, and a lot of it depends on sort of what's going on around me as well. In my previous job, where I was doing a lot of travel and I was on a plane a lot, I was reading a lot of John Grisham because easy to read, nice short chapters.
Right.
You can pick it up all the way along. With over the summer when I had a little bit more time, I was reading a lot of Clancy because they're very in-depth, long books, and you can really kind of submerge yourself into it. So a lot of it goes by what's going on around me and what kind of attention I can throw to a book, and also kind of what I'm in the mood for. I mean, so it's not so much the author; it's more about the subject matter.
Right, but it's still that same.
It's all within that genre,
right.
but it's just kind of what they offer into that story.
Did you ever, at any time, experience like self-doubt? I mean because a lot of authors, me included, you sit there and go, I can't do this. Who am I kidding? I can't do this. I mean, was that something that you experienced? And also, do you think that having a co-author in any way affected any self-doubt that you may or may not have had?
Well, I went into it so remember how we got there, right? So
it was just sort of a thing to do.
It was just something to do, right? So there's really, even when we decided, we actually have the makings of a real story here, we really didn't have a plan for it, right? So anything that we've done on top of that has been, sort of
like gravy.
Yeah, it really has been. So the better question is going to be, so now the next one that's coming out.
Oh, there's another one.
There's another one.
And it's co-authored by the same.
It's co-authored by the same person.
Here we go.
That one was actually written as something to be e-published.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see now that we actually wrote a book intending to write a book, what happens with that.
But even with the first one, though, I think even though you were doing it for fun and there is a point where you do say to yourself, this is a book here, and we do have to. I mean, this is what I always say to people. I say, there are plenty of people out there who have started books, but there are not plenty of people who have actually finished them. And so I think you get to that point where you go, I mean, there must have been some point where you said, I got it. This is serious. I have to finish this. Wasn't there?
There was.
Yeah.
And really it came, I want to say around chapter 18 or 19, where I was like, we really have to just get this to a conclusion now. I mean, we've done a bunch of stuff. These characters have been in a lot of different situations.
Right.
And we didn't really, I think if you read the book, one thing you'll notice is that a lot happens in the confines of a day. Like we didn't really day part it very well. And you really don't get the sense that there's a lot of concurrency going on. So
Right.
They had a very long day, and it was time for the day to end.
You know what I love about your process too? I mean, for me, when I was working on my book, I don't think I could have gotten through the process without knowing my ending. And it seems to me that you guys really didn't know where the book was going. I mean, you were having this back and forth, and it was sort of just going off into wherever it needed to go. We
didn't know, and it's the interesting part about it too, because remember, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about the story. We don't talk about the characters. We don't talk about the character development. We don't talk about the character names. So I could write something I think sets something up that's going to be really good, and then the next chapter it goes in a completely different direction, and I'm like, okay, now what am I going to do? And she's introduced 4 new characters to the story. Do any of these characters work with anything that was going on?
Right. Was there ever the thought that you said, I need to call her, and because this isn't working, or this isn't the direction I wanted to go?
The thought, yes.
Right.
But again, because like and it's interesting because I'll come back to the second book. In that first book, the thought was there, but we never acted on it because the goal wasn't really to write a book.
Right.
The goal was just to see what happens.
Right.
In the second book, where we actually set out to write a book, you start getting a little worried because suddenly you're like, well, what are you doing? That's not the story. This is the story over here. But we've in the second book, we've had emails, hey, do you think we should talk about this? And the answer's always been no.
Because you're afraid it might ruin the process that you guys had together, right?
I think they're good. They're certainly, everyone has told me they're readable, if nothing else.
And yeah, that's a great compliment. Right. Oh, that's great. So the second book, I would assume, is also a thriller type story.
Also a thriller, completely different setting, completely different plot.
Right. I would hope.
All new characters. We didn't blow anything up this time yet.
Is it also like a news background, that kind of?
Nope.
So it's completely different.
Completely different.
Did she do the first chapter for this one?
In this one, she did the first chapter.
She did. And how did you find that? How did you find working off of someone else's story and not your own? Was that?
It was actually for my first chapter, which, I did the even number chapters in this book.
Right.
That first chapter I wrote, chapter 2, was a lot tougher because, the way she wrote it, like in the first book, right, there was, this definitive thing that happened. There's this explosion,
right.
and there's a real definitive stuff that happened. In her first chapter, it was really more of a scene setter. It was, here's a character, here's another character. They have this little dance studio thing. There's the stoner guy who comes kind of meandering in. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do with these things now?
So do you think that she sort of left it to you? Okay, here you go. I've set up the story. Now it's your time to create that boom that we had in chapter 1 of the previous book, sort of. Did you feel the pressure to have something happen?
I did feel the pressure to have something happen, but the pressure wasn't. The pressure was more in thinking about, okay, so because this time we're actually writing a book,
as opposed to that first one.
As opposed to the first time we were just messing around. We had to, I was thinking about the reader and readability, right? So, okay, so I get through that first chapter, and then what's going to happen? There has to be some reason to get me to chapter 3. Something has to happen here to make it seem like there's a reason to keep going.
Did you think that it should have happened in chapter 1 at first? Did you read this and go, whoa, wait a minute, nothing's happened yet?
No, I was fine with that.
You were open to whatever scenario she wanted to.
Because, even when you read like a Tom Clancy book, right, you could go 12 chapters before something actually happens.
That's true. You're
learning the minutia of the inner workings of the Pentagon and where all the paper goes. And that's 12 chapters. And something's got to happen here eventually. There's 1,000 more pages to go.
Right. Now you have 2 young girls.
Yes.
And when did you write? I mean, I tend to set my clock for 2 a.m. and I get up in the middle of the night and I write. I mean, that's the only time that I can without the phone ringing or people asking for juice and things like that. I mean, you have a day job and you have children. Was it difficult finding the time?
That is the biggest challenge for any writing that I do, including, might I add, when I have to actually do some work at home.
Right.
Is just finding that time, especially being a single parent. That's a 24/7, 365 job in itself. Either the upside or the downside for me is I do work in the city, so I have a fairly long commute.
True, that's true.
That hour on the train is quality writing time for me. I can, put on some headphones and dive in, and I can do 10,000 words in that hour.
Really? And what do you write on? Do you write on an iPad or your laptop?
A laptop. Yeah.
Laptop?
Usually my MacBook, sometimes my work donated HP Pro.
Now, what would you say is the biggest misconception that people have about writing or about writing a book? Do you think there is one? Maybe there's.
I think the biggest misconception is that people don't think that they have a story to tell. I mean. So it's funny, and my 8-year-old, she's almost 9, but my 8-year-old, yesterday, sort of out of nowhere, yesterday afternoon, sat down and decided to write a screenplay.
Really?
Yeah, she just sat at the
I love
computer
that.
and started
I love
writing a
that.
screenplay. And I was sort of hedging between being supportive and helpful and trying not to tell her what to do with it, because it was her thing and, how she wanted to play out and the way the characters developed and stuff like that.
Now,
So,
why do you think she did that? Do you think you influenced her? It was something that she had seen you do, the writing?
I think that's a very small part of it.
Okay.
I mean, it sort of gets into the order. So my older one is very theatrical.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the younger one, wanted to be a part of that, but isn't as theatrical. So she figured she would write a play for the older one to be in.
Hey, I love it.
It's great. And as she was kind of going through it, and she's like, "How do you spell this?" And going, "Do you want to hear it now? Do you want to hear it now?" At 8 years old, right? So her scope of experiences is fairly limited, right?
Right,
so
right.
her ability to tell a story is, limited by her experiences.
Right, right.
I mean, you throw a little imagination on top of it, but it's still, the world according to a 9-year-old.
Right.
When you get to, north of 40, I mean, you have a bunch of experiences. Even if you don't think that they're a story of and in themselves, they tell a story. They're part of a story. So going back to your question, the biggest misconception is that, you don't have a story in you. You do have a story in you because you have all of those experiences. Those experiences put together, can become a story.
So it's sort of just deciding on one of your stories and sort of honing it.
Deciding on your experiences, I think.
Okay.
And then molding. I think that the story is built on the experience, and that's how you get the color to your story.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. So your daughter's almost done with her screenplay, or is she? I mean, she must be a fast writer like her dad. She's looking to co-author the screenplay.
She was on the very short scenes. She was on scene 5. She envisions 18 scenes.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, so the writing is done very quickly, I must add. And so you knew you wanted this to be an ebook at this point, right?
Right.
No hardcover, no paperback. So what was your first step? I mean, had you researched the companies that you could use? You self-published, by the way.
Yes, self-published.
How did you go about that process?
I did some very quick, over-the-top type research on, who could get me to which platforms best and fastest. And also a little bit of background in terms of sort of the differences between Kindle, Nook, and iPad. Fortunately for me, my previous job at CBS, I spent a lot of time in that sort of realm. So it was, I mean, I didn't have to spend a lot of time learning about the devices and learning about how people interact with the devices. I really just needed to understand the best and most straightforward paths to publishing onto those devices.
And what was your path? What did you just choose to do? What did you?
So what I did was, and I don't know how much detail we should go.
Well, I
just
mean,
go through the whole thing.
Well, what company did? I mean,
I used Smashwords.
Okay.
For formatting, to get an ISBN, and also to reach iPad. And some of those, like the smaller kind of tablets, are the Sony readers and stuff like that.
And there's nothing that you have to pay for Smashwords.
Nothing,
I mean, it's just totally
it's totally free. And you get into their, I forget what they call it, but there's a program within it that kind of gets you slightly elevated within their iPad publishing queue.
Right.
And you have to, if you want to get to iPad, you have to go through, it's like 5 or 6 different little companies that you use to get there. You can't actually self-publish directly to iPad.
And so Smashwords was your foray into that world, basically.
Into iPad.
Into iPad, okay.
And then for Kindle and Nook, I just published those directly myself.
Okay.
Through Amazon, through Pubbit.
Did you feel that the book needed to be edited in any way, or were there editing services, or you just felt like it was good to go and I wanted to get it out there?
I felt it was good to go and get, I mean, again, going back, so in my life, my experience, when I come out of a journalism background, I felt
True.
I felt qualified.
I'm qualified to edit
self-edit. I spent a lot of time taking 3-minute stories and making them a minute and a half.
That's true.
So
That's true.
Probably work that out. So I really went through and self-edited. It probably would have helped to have someone a little bit more grammatically savvy than I am take a romp through the book as well. Sort of reading it on my iPad, I noticed a couple of things, a couple of commas misplaced and stuff like that.
Right, right. Is that something you'll do with the second book? Have an editor go through it, or?
Probably. I'm not sure yet.
Right.
But probably.
Now, in terms of marketing for the book, I mean, how do you promote your ebook? Because you can't do book signings.
Yeah, I did offer to sign people's Kindles. We did a lot of social networking stuff, a lot of Facebook, Twitter. We set up a Facebook page for the book.
Very good.
And then we used a couple of other, we created some author sites as well that were out there. And then there's tons of different kind of opportunities to do that. So the reality is, I think the best marketing that we did for the book, quite honestly, was we printed up old school business cards.
Old school.
And
Very nice.
Literally, as we were traveling around, either in the city, getting on a plane or something like that, anyone we saw with an e-reader got a card.
Say, hey. You were one of those guys that stand on the corner giving out literature.
And literally, it's really tough to tell where the purchases come from, but I tend to think that that's where, just looking at the traffic on the Facebook page, looking at the traffic on the other blogs and stuff we set up, doesn't correlate to our sales. So it had come from someplace.
That's a great idea. Did you come up with that?
Yeah.
Very nice. Now, there's a question I like to ask my guests, my last question, and this comes straight from my blog. Oprah has famously said that there's no such thing as luck without preparation and a moment of opportunity. Would you agree or disagree with that statement with regard to your life and your work as a writer, particularly with this novel?
Give me the statement again.
Oprah has famously said that there's no such thing as luck without a moment of opportunity and preparation.
I think that's true.
I think that's true.
I do think you have to be lucky to recognize the opportunity, though.
I agree.
But yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a lot, right, that I wish went a different way.
I'm sorry. You're going to have to come back when you promote your second book. I think we're running out of time. Thank you so much for being here. And we'll see you next time on The Writer's Dream. Thank you.